3 o'clock now.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
A very good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to those of you who've joined us online, and also for those of you who are here with us at COP in Dubai. My name is Yasmin Batliwala, and I'm the Chief Executive of Advocates for International Development, or A4ID. And I will be chairing or co-chairing this session along with Professor Mary Claire Condonier-Seger from the Centre for International Sustainable Development Law, and also Dr. Lena Dent from World Future Council. The title of this session is Global Stocktake Through Legal Lenses, Implementing Outcomes via Climate Law and Policy Reform. We have quite a lot going on in this session, so we hope that you are able to stay to the whole length of it. And it includes, amongst other things, 2 roundtables with some amazing speakers. We have keynote speakers, and also we have a presentation of the outcomes and award laureates. So there is a lot to be taking in and a lot to be thinking about. I would like to particularly thank the partners that are working together with us. This is hosted by the Climate Law and Governance Initiative, the Centre for International Sustainable Development Law, Advocates for International Development, the Centre for Human Rights and Climate Change Research, the World Future Council, and the Pacific Institute of Climate Solutions, University of Victoria. So how's that for good partnership working? Now I'd like to thank all of you, both online and here in Dubai, for attending with us today. And I'd now like to hand over to Professor Marie Claire, who's going to do the next section.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. Thank you also to Lena and to all of our partners and all of the incredible jurists and organizations that have cooperated, in some cases for years, since 2005 in the Montreal COP11, when the Climate Law and Governance Initiative was first launched, drawing together international organizations that were leading at the very cutting edge of law and policy, together with university law faculties, experts commissions, judges, general counsel of multilateral investment banks and others. It has truly been an extraordinary cooperation, and we are deeply honored and pleased to be able to present to you a progress report as much as outcomes of the Climate Law and Governance Day and Legal Specialization course here in Dubai at COP28. As the Global Stocktake reveals, the current context for climate change is beyond critical. 23 billion tons of CO2 equivalent is the emissions gap that the current commitments made in the nationally determined contributions will leave us with. The world is already 1.1 degrees warmer. We are not on track yet, and our current trajectory takes us up to 4.4 degrees of warming, which, as we know, renders much of our Earth uninhabitable. The impacts are not just terrible, but also profoundly unjust. As Mary Robinson has said, and as she said at Climate Law and Governance Day in Paris at the Sorbonne, climate change is the justice challenge of our century. 3.3 to 3.6 billion people already live in highly climate vulnerable countries, according to the IPCC. Adaptation costs will reach $300 billion a year by 2030, according to the OECD. However, we still have the chance to turn things around. We still have the chance to make the transformations that are needed. And there are opportunities within this crisis. According to some estimates with the IPCC and UNEP and the UNFCCC, net zero, 26 trillion might be the net gain of a net zero economy. And indeed, 65 million green jobs wait to be created. The Global Financial Alliance that we launched in Glasgow has tried to align 132 trillion in private finance and equity and managed assets with the Paris Agreement. What is missing, of course, is the correct signals, not just from markets, but, as my colleague Christina Voigt said this morning, from the law. And in particular, as our Climate Law and Governance Initiative research has shown, out of 186 nationally determined contributions, 169 are counting on legal and institutional reform to achieve their goals, with 60 plus calling directly for increased legal capacity strengthening and legal technical assistance. So that gap that is there is a gap that many organizations are collaborating to try slowly together to bridge. And in Climate Law and Governance Day 2023, hosted together with many, many partners at Middlesex University Dubai, together with the University of Dubai and Cambridge University, we saw over 1,700 registrants and over 170 leaders and experts and jurists come together in order to share solutions. 16 incredibly rich and substantive sessions over 3 major plenaries, 2 incredibly empowering and inspiring ceremonies, and indeed a rich program that followed, not just a legal specialization course with extra training being provided 2 days later at University of Dubai, but also a rich program of pavilions, panels, and projects with partners over the last few days to expand on and deepen some of the discussions of those outcomes. So we are very, very honored to be with you today to present the preliminary conclusions and the progress that has been made in the Climate Law and Governance Initiative with many, many partners collaborating, and then to look forward with you and launch some truly extraordinary results, including, of course, the winners of the Climate Law and Governance Awards and the winners of the Global Climate Law Essay Competition in this brief side event. We're going to leap straight into the substance with 2 short video keynotes from partners, one calling for transformation through the law all the way from the Arctic, Indigenous leader, Honorable Sheila Watt-Cloutier, the former chair and award-winning Indigenous voice for the Arctic, and then followed by the Climate Change and Human Rights Center leader, Professor Omoyemin Lucia Odigi Emmanuel from Nigeria, who have both sent us their kind words. From those 2 keynotes, we'll leap directly into our first session. We're joined by some of the leaders of the rich, substantive, and detailed sessions that were held today over the last 2 weeks as part of Climate Law and Governance Day and beyond. And they have kindly agreed to come and to share some of the global legal solutions, obstacles and opportunities that they have been highlighting and discussing throughout the last few days here in Dubai. So we will leap straight into it with our videos from 2 leaders. And I will, of course, recognize and honor Professor Ian Mauro, who is our 5th, not present, but with us in spirit, co-chair from the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions at the University of Victoria on Canada's west coast, on a 12-hour time difference from us right now. So for him, it is 3 o'clock in the morning, and he has quite kindly agreed to be on video introducing our keynote speaker. Thank you. Shall we have the video?
And that matters because the original inhabitants of these lands People who have been on these waters and territories for thousands of years have witnessed environmental change. They have navigated it. They have tremendous insight to help us collectively figure out how to deal with climate change through Indigenous science, Indigenous values, natural law, an understanding of the laws of nature. And I've had the great privilege of working with Indigenous people in many parts of Canada, including the Canadian Arctic, and I met Silawat Kluche, a visionary, an Inuit leader who has helped us to understand how Indigenous knowledge can actually support the highest levels of climate law and governance. And she helped to bring the Stockholm Convention into ratification, one of the most important and fast-moving environmental treaties that the UN ever produced, and also linked climate change and human rights and brought the first petition to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, claiming that the United States had violated Inuit rights for their unabated and unchecked emissions. And that opened the conversation to the linkages between climate change and human rights. And Sheila, or Sila, as you'll hear, is very pleased to be in these conversations. And I'm going to show you a little conversation that we had to bring this message to you at COP28.
Serious increase in legal knowledge, capacity development, legal awareness raising and engagement are needed to deliver on the Paris Agreement and the outcomes, paths, and agreements of past conferences of parties. So far,
Hello, my name is Ian Morrow, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions.
If we could ask you to play the last part of the second video, of the first video, the keynote speaker, Silawat Kluche, before passing to Professor Omoyemen, that would be brilliant. There we go. Thank you.
I'm Anina Pullman from Pujrak in Nunavut, but having lived also in Nunavut for almost 2 decades, I traveled only by dog team the first 10 years of my life and didn't learn any English till I was 6. Went on to do education work, trying to improve our education system. Then I did a lot of international work, elected with the Inuit Circumpolar Council on the POPs Treaty, the persistent organic pollutants that led to the successful Stockholm Convention on these toxins that ended up in our food chain and the nursing milk of our mothers. As a mother and grandmother, for me, it was a no-brainer to say, this is not just a chemical story. We were successful by engaging in the politics of influence rather than the politics of protest and educating the world about who we were and what toxins meant for us in terms of health. You know, I was out there putting a human face to these issues. Toxins in our food chain and climate change are very parallel in the Arctic. It's all about urgent health matters and it's all about cultural survival, both of them. And so they intersect. Climate change is yet another assault on a way of life that has so negatively impacted us. And so I became the spokesperson for the coalition of Indigenous peoples of the circumpolar world in protection of Inuit rights and culture. We were able to then just switch right away to addressing the issues of climate change because the two are very interconnected. And that work led me to pioneering the work on connecting climate change to human rights. And so we were able to really get the attention of the world on climate change as a human rights issue. And we were ahead of our time. Within 5 years, it became mainstream language. Climate change, human rights issue, where the UN, Amnesty International, and many other organizations now see it as a human rights issue. So we paved the way for that.
A lot of your story is obviously inside your book, the right to be cold. What does that mean to you, that statement?
Well, it means everything to me. The right to be cold is our right to health, our right to our homes. There's so many rights involved in that. Every right that we have that is already entrenched in international law is the right. And it's our right to be Inuit as we know it. And our right to be Inuit as we know it has been limited and diminished because of all of these environmental problems that we're facing today. We thrive in the cold. Our animals thrive in the cold. We thrive in the cold. Ice is our life force, and this is really about the livelihoods of Inuit, the culture, the wisdom, because as the ice goes, so does the wisdom of Inuit. The solutions are not far from home. They are home. And for me, I really do believe strongly that culture is our medicine. And I also strongly believe that Indigenous wisdom is the medicine the world seeks in addressing sustainability issues. Don't see the Indigenous wisdom or Inuit wisdom as victims of globalization, of commercialization, of climate change, but see us as teachers. And once you see us as teachers, we have much to teach about these issues. It's about building partnerships with those that I think are going to be grounded in the understanding of Indigenous wisdom, you know, and building those kinds of partnerships with others who have that influence and the resources around them that would help to elevate those kinds of messages to the world. But again, as I always say in my talks, it will happen at the speed of empathy, and it will happen at the speed of trust. And those are really important in terms of building empathetic, deeper understanding of Indigenous issues, because then you can create a building of trusting relationships. That's reconciliation in real time. And so again, it's about working together. How do we build a sustainable world? And for me, leadership is really important. You know, leadership is about really bringing those pieces together from an authentic place. We are the land, you know, and the land is us. We've got to be real about these issues, and that we've got to think differently.
These wonderful insights that Sila has presented help about thinking.
Thank you very much. I think we can all give a round of applause to our speaker who has shared some of her stories. I understand we have a second contribution from the leader of the Climate Change and Human Rights Center in Nigeria. And if you can just let me know if you're ready for the video now or later. Yeah, now? All right, excellent.
Knowledge, capacity development, legal awareness raising and engagement are needed to deliver on the Paris Agreement and the outcomes, pacts, and agreements of past conferences of parties. So far, COP28 has in the last 2 weeks hosted a series of high-level events and roundtables where world leaders share their views and expectations for the global stocktake outcomes, with the hope of achieving an increased ambition and preferring concrete accelerated action points that will enhance support for climate change. The role of law in climate discourse and action cannot be undermined. The need to match law to the science of climate change has become more urgent than ever before in human history. We need to articulate and prefer recommendations at this side events on how to generate legal strategies for climate action that will support science recommendations on the need to achieve greenhouse gas emission peak before 2025 and to achieve a decline of 43% by 2030 in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. With net zero pledges fluttering and climate risks and impacts rising, legal and institutional reforms are urgently required to respond reliably to challenging global outcomes. We need to articulate and prepare recommendations at this side event on what legal strategies, including reforms, can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, phase out fossil fuel productions, and promote a just transition of the energy sources compatible with sustainable development goals. It is necessary for us to assess how far our legal pathways and strategies in building litigation has been effective to commit states, the private sector, and other non-state actors to pursue and sustain low-emission development strategy, the relevance of climate change obligation, and the need to develop future human rights defenders to join in the vision and mission to save the world. Shaping the implementation of outcomes via climate law and policy reforms, while using the instrument of law and human rights to shape the science policy interface is our goal. This side event offers all participants, led by a well-selected panelists, the opportunity to discuss how to scale up legal action at the global, regional, and local levels. For us, at the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change, we shall continue as environmental stewards, dedicated to building legal capacity, providing the platform, and networking with partners to mobilize human rights and climate change education, research, and action to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. At this side event, we expect that our recommendations will shaping discourse on how legal principles relating to climate change can be standardized as foundational principles to shape the global stocktake, especially future ones. We also expect that recommendations will strengthen legal capacity and strategies for auditing and developing collaborations for climate legal litigation. We expect that our recommendations will increase capacity building on the nexus between law and climate change and emphasize human rights and climate change solutions. We expect that your conversation, discourse, and outcomes will emphasize the role of law and legal reforms in the development, implementation, and follow-up of countries' long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategy and the global stocktake. Serious increase in legal knowledge, capacity development, legal awareness raising, and engagement are needed to deliver on the Paris Agreement and the outcomes, pacts, and agreements of past conferences of parties. So far, COP28 has in the last 2 weeks hosted a series of high-level events and roundtables where world leaders share their views and expectations for the global stocktake outcomes, with a hope of achieving an increased ambition and preferring concrete accelerated action points that will enhance support for climate change. The role of law in climate discourse and action cannot be undermined. The need to match law to the science of climate change has become more urgent than ever before in human history. We need to articulate and prefer recommendations at this side event on how to generate legal strategies for climate action that will support science recommendations on the need to achieve greenhouse gas emission peak before 2025.
We'd like to thank Professor Omoyemi as well for her excellent address. Professor Ian Mauro and the Honourable Sheila Watt-Cloutier have won many awards for their work in the Arctic and indeed worldwide. And Professor Omoyemi, who wished she could be here with us today, but is doing incredible work in her country to defend human rights, as you heard. We would like to thank you and honour you for helping to contribute to this event. We wanted to, especially through 2 roundtables, give you a chance to gain a bit the flavour of the rich program of substantive legal challenges and solutions that were presented in the Climate Law and Governance Day last week here in Dubai, and indeed in the work that has been ongoing throughout the years in the Climate Law and Governance Initiative. And in order to do that, we are extremely thrilled to be able to invite some of the leaders of the different sessions that took place to present to you, just briefly, 3 ideas in 3 minutes about solutions where law is actually making a difference on the ground and globally. So to start that round, I'm deeply honored to call the lead counsel for climate change of our Centre for International Sustainable Development Law, together with the lead counsel for peace, justice and good governance of the CISDL, who are also leaders in the World Commission on Environmental Law, up to the podium to give us their thoughts of 3 of the legal solutions that they saw as most promising at the global level in the debates last week. Maître Ayman Cherkaoui and Dr. Fabiano de Andrade Correa, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I can speak from there if that's okay with everyone. Excellent. Happy to speak from here. I can see my Fabiano is there, so more than welcome to join in if you so prefer. We can play musical chairs in that sense. So very delighted to be here with you, and I'll share some very brief remarks based on 3 ideas that are connected to some small stories that happen here that I think are quite of interest in terms of providing some life to the elements I wanted to share with you. The first of which is the importance of networks. The importance of networks. We are very much a community and a network of communities as well that is always growing bigger and bigger as those climate law and governance day take place year after year, and a deep connection to the local community of law and governance experts that are here. We're very glad for our partnership with the Middlesex University, the University of Dubai, and all the amazing experts and students that have enabled this work to go forward in the Climate Law and Governance Day and the Climate Law and Governance Specialization course, as you will hear later. And in terms of the experience of network, the story I wanted to share in that regard is that yesterday evening, I was at the Rove, not far from here, and I was approached by somebody that was in the Climate Law and Governance Day, and also took the course and the Climate Law and Governance Specialization course. So he knew me from that, and he approached me and he told me that he was doing some op-ed for some newspaper, and he was himself a lawyer, having taken a step away from law in order to go more into science. And now he felt comfortable enough about the science to go back into law. And he wanted to write something about CCS, which, as you know, is an important topic that has been very much discussed here. And as I was discussing with him, I happened to just walk by one of the biggest experts in the world on CCS. So I made a connection right there, and that's a connection that was easy to make because we are such a close-knit community of people that care about this and are willing to help one another and to raise one another. Also, in the same spirit, not about network, but about the importance of law, you will have often heard my dear friend, Professor Christina Voigt, who's the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, and also Marie-Claire was referring to her, and Fabiano is also the co-chair of the specialist group on climate change law within the WCL, and you will have often heard her say that it's about law in general, not just about environmental law. It's about really the transformative power of law, and not specifically environmental law. And it is very important for us to have that in mind and not be too narrow in our understanding of where we can make the most impact. Because really, all of us in the legal and governance community have an important role to play in that regard, and we are very much needed. And the story that I wanted to share as an illustration of that was yesterday I was just walking around in B1, and a dear friend from a LDC country just grabbed me from the shoulder and she told me, we're in LDC coordination, we need some legal support. I'm not from LDC, but she pulled me and I provided some legal advice in some issue they were having linked to processes. And that's the kind of community that we are, that's the kind of community that we need to be ever more so. And the very last point is really connected to some of the topics that I was happy to be privy to in the context of the Climate Law and Governance Day and the Climate Law and Governance Specialization course. On the Climate Law and Governance Day, a whole array of topics are discussed, and we'll hear more about the outcomes later on, but I was more engaged in the one linked to technology. And clearly, there's so much space for law to play an important role to foster a development that is equitable, that takes into account the entire aspects of sustainable development, minimizes trade-offs, maximizes synergies, whether it is in terms of mitigation or adaptation or loss and damage or other issues. And that brings me to the topic I was privy to be one of the lecturers on, which is on the course on adaptation and on loss and damage. And I would be remiss not to mention the dear memory of Professor Salim Ul-Houq, a mentor to many of us in this process, who is very well known in these days about loss and damage and the essential role he played in advancing that cause, but he was also very much instrumental for adaptation and capacity building. And in that regard, when it comes to, therefore, adaptation and loss and damage, as we are speaking, there are still ongoing very deep conversation on GGA decision and how all those elements of loss and damage and adaptation and others are reflected in an equitable and balanced manner in the GST decision. However, from the very first day, we saw a very important decision being taken. We saw very important announcements being made in the context of loss and damage. And since then, we have seen progress when it comes to the Santiago network and all those issues. I think it's important to, as I was discussing with many youth that are here that are feeling climate anxiety, to acknowledge the scale of the challenge, but also to acknowledge the willingness and drive there is to help push this agenda forward. And it is my firm belief that the legal and governance community needs to continue playing that role and needs to engage further in sharing their expertise, in building their capacity, in strengthening the capacity, enabling ambition and action in the context of the Paris Agreement and sustainable development. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you especially, Maître Ayman Cherkaoui, for your leadership and for chairing, indeed, the climate law driving climate technology plenary that was so successful and substantive during Climate Law and Governance Day. We're looking forward to, as part of the outcomes of this collaboration, some new research projects and some very exciting new collaborations to follow up from that plenary. I will now turn to Professor Nazir Mohammed from University of Dubai Faculty of Law and Professor Tenia Kiriazi, who is Deputy Director and Head of Law and Politics at Middlesex University Dubai, and also, of course, the founding chair of the International Law Association new branch that was launched here for the Emirates. And in particular, can you tell us just 3 ideas in 3 minutes about what does the Global Stocktake reveal about progress in implementing the Paris Agreement, and what are the main legal and institutional barriers? In particular, how can these law and policy barriers be overcome internationally through courage, contributions, and compliance? And what, in your view, especially having done such an incredible job hosting us the last 10 days, are the first steps? Perhaps, Professor Tenia, you would like to go first.
Thank you. I'll try to be concise because I know it's a back-to-back
3 ideas in 3 minutes.
Yes. So, idea and thought number 1 is that we have seen, it was pretty evident in the law and governance, in the Climate Law and Governance Day and in the specialization course, that law is a tool that can accelerate and can guarantee the success and efficiency of all our efforts to address climate change through legislation, legislative actions, through judicial work, through advocacy, and through enforcement. Thought number 2 is that law alone cannot do that. So we've seen it, and Ayman, you mentioned that. It is very important to have an interdisciplinary approach to everything we do, for law practitioners, for law students, for law academics, for lawyers, for judges. We need to communicate with science, with economics, with tech, with all these different parts that together they form the puzzle of our efforts to fight climate change. So law alone is not is not enough. And we have been fighting alone. I think that every group is being very committed and shows a lot of passion, but they do it alone. And that's one of the biggest takeaways that you mentioned, Eamon, earlier about the networks. We need those networks, but no, those networks don't need to be those specialized, isolated networks of like-minded and individuals and those who have been educated in the same way, with the same discipline, and see things from one only perspective. And the third thought, that is the outcome of the other two, is we need a lot of work if we are to get where we want to get. And for me, the most important element that we need to build is education and training. Education starts from the schools, and I'm glad to see that the schools, I have a son, he's 11-year-old, and they talk about climate change at school. And I don't know if at university we talk enough about climate change. So law schools have a lot of responsibility, and this has to be a bottom-up approach, not a top-down. We have been doing top-down, but we need reach. I don't think we have reach. There are a lot of isolated initiatives that happen in different universities, very good universities, 1 to 100 ranked universities. But what we need is reach. We need the smallest law schools to integrate, to understand and integrate climate law in their curriculum, because climate change and climate law transcends different areas of law. And I don't think this is something we are taught at law school, that students are taught at law schools. So we've done it with human rights. I remember when I was studying law, we only had a separate module that called human rights. Now human rights transcends different modules. We are doing it with sustainable development goals, but we need to do it for climate change. So networks and initiatives like the Climate Law and Governance Initiative will help us create those networks and achieve this reach that we need to reach every single law student, and at every single place that needs to and wants to address and be part of this movement of climate change.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. And Professor Tenya, especially thank you for all of your hard work over the last year preparing for and then so beautifully hosting us with over 1,700 online and in-person registrants in University of Middlesex, Dubai this week in Dubai. I will now turn to Professor Nasir to just say 3 ideas in 3 minutes in terms of what can be done to overcome law and policy barriers to respond to the Global Stocktake findings.
Thank you very much. Just like my colleague, I will be very brief. I think the first point I would say is capacity building. It's obvious from the discussions, right from the Climate Law and Governance Day to the Legal Specialization course, to the side events that were conducted here, that developing countries are lacking in terms of, there is a huge gap in terms of capacity building. So there is need for a robust initiative, an all-encompassing one, that will take into account the needs of vulnerable and developing countries. The second idea is, I believe, is effective legislations. And here I'm looking at domestic legislations. Of course, at the international level, we do have a problem with enforcement. But at the same time, from the domestic level angle as well, there is a need for a robust legal regime. And that can only be done, it will go back to the capacity building aspect, because there is need for the expertise to develop the legislations at the local level. The third point is just transition, and this is very important. This is something that has actually featured in one of our sessions yesterday, being the day of agriculture, water, and food. So when we're talking about climate change, we also need to take into account what are the measurable and implementable mechanisms that can be put in place that would lead towards effective pacing out in a just transition manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker comes in online, Professor Alessandra Lemon, the President of the Environmental Law Commission of the Brazilian Bar of Rio Grande do Sul State Chapter. I understand she is already with us. Alessandra? Ah, marvelous. Thank you. Can you give us 3 ideas in 3 minutes in terms of solutions, law and policy solutions, especially at the global level, that you heard during Climate Law and Governance Day and would like to share today?
Of course. Good morning from Brazil. Thank you so very much for having me today. I am joining you from the airport in São Paulo, so I do apologize in advance for any disruptions. Sticking to the prompt of presenting 3 ideas in 3 minutes, I want to talk about the role of law and policy in the GST process. In 1, determining best practices for NDC preparation. 2, enhancing participation of non-party stakeholders. And 3, helping flesh out the normative elements of the Paris Agreement. So with regard to my first topic, best practices for NDC preparation, parties will need to present new NDCs by COP30 in Brazil. And these new NDCs need to be informed by the results of the GST process held at COP24. So law and policy can help strengthen the process of submitting new NDCs by helping design best practices for NDC preparation, such as stakeholder capacity building, systems for transparency and public scrutiny, incorporating experience from previous NDCs, stakeholder consultations and peer reviews, partnering with organizations to develop robust NDCs, and establishing scientific and quantitative procedures, just to give a few examples. As for my second idea, that of enhancing participation of non-party stakeholders, or NPS, I wanted to mention that Decision 19, CMA 1, paragraph 10, notes that the global stocktake will be a party-driven process conducted in a transparent manner and with the participation of non-party stakeholders. So as such, the inclusion of non-party stakeholders, including companies, financial institutions, cities, states, regions, and civil society organizations in the mandate of the GST is critical to ensure we are accurately assessing progress, identifying gaps, fostering implementation, and raising ambition. And law and policy can help design approaches to enhance NPC participation. And finally, with regard to my last topic, my last idea for today, which is a normative element of the Paris Agreement, I wanted to say that the Paris Agreement is generally known for its softer approach, which was, of course, carefully crafted by diplomats to ensure its universal acceptance. But it is combined with provisions with normative content. So indeed, the Paris Agreement does contain normative elements such as NDC highest possible ambition in Article 4.3, NDC progressive ambition also in Article 4.3, implementation of domestic mitigation measures, Article 4.2, alignment of NDC ambition to the global temperature goal in Articles 4.1 and 2.1a. And last but not least, NDCs being informed by the outcome of each iteration of the GST process, which is enshrined in Articles 4.9 and 14.3. So all of these normative elements are interconnected, and the GST process can potentially inform and reinforce the other normative elements of the Paris Agreement so as to push for more ambition, especially in bridging the gap between international contributions and domestic implementation. Thank you.
Thank you as well for 3 ideas in 3 minutes. Very substantive. Now, I will underline, before passing to my co-chair, Yasmin, for the second tour de force of the 3 ideas in 3 minutes, that many of those who have just shared their ideas with you are speaking on the basis of very rich and substantive sessions that they either chaired or organized during Climate Law and Governance Day just last week here in Dubai. They are also, however, contributing, quite extraordinarily actually, to a new book that is coming out in this area that is co-edited by myself and Professor Christina Voigt, who advocate Ayman just mentioned, that looks at, in particular, courage in terms of ambition, contributions in terms of NDCs, and compliance in terms of the Paris Agreement implementation and compliance mechanism. That book is now in the final stages, and we hope that it will be hitting your shelves by April or May with Routledge. And some of these ideas and some of this work is represented in that book. I am going to just turn briefly to the participants in this roundtable. If you have any questions for that first tour, Thalsa has a microphone and is happy to bring it to you. Seeing none as yet, we can pass to the second roundtable and then take again a set of moments for questions. So I would like to thank especially Professor Nazir, Professor Tenya, and Advocate Ayman for helping to introduce us a little to the flavor of the day, as well as, of course, Advocate Alessandra online, who was here earlier and is now in an airport. And I would like to pass the chair to my colleague, Yasmin, who will introduce the second roundtable.
Thank you very much indeed, Marie-Claire. Can I now ask the new panel to join? And I believe we also have people joining online. Oh, he's not coming. Okay. Now, the second roundtable is going to be looking at scaling up local and regional legal innovations for climate action, human rights, and sustainability. We have on our panel Daniel Eccleston, who's the legal specialist from the IDLO. Welcome. Lara Duvatzit is from the climate lead from the International Bar Council Association. Letitia Perron Campos Mello, who I think should be online.
We hope, but we are not sure.
We hope, but we don't know for sure exactly.
Oh, not online yet.
She's not?
Nope.
Not at all. She just messaged me saying tech difficulties, but that's okay.
All right.
And
We understand that Ian Mauro and Cynthia Milton are joining us from a 12-hour time difference.
Okay.
Yeah, that really is 3-something in the morning for them. So they may or may not be able to join us at all, and that's fine.
So with respect to this panel, we have 3 questions. What innovative policy and legal solutions can be advanced at local, regional and regional levels to respond to climate change imperatives? What can rights-based approaches, economic rights and instruments, environmental regulations and indigenous legal orders contribute? And finally, how to scale up capacity fast, engaging current and future generations of law and policy leaders for climate justice. So, as we've said, 3 ideas, 3 minutes. So can I ask you, first of all, to kickstart the questions, please, Daniel?
Of course, yeah. Colleagues, friends, it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of IDLO, and thank you to all of the great organisers here for convening this important session just before the sun sets on COP28. The first point I want to highlight is the need to do justice to the concept of a just transition. Just transition is 2 words, and we're seeing a lot of focus on the second of those, from the tripling of renewable energy, the fact that 130 countries have pledged to do this, to the growing momentum around the phase-out of a fossil fuel, which we may or may not get an agreement on within the next 48 hours. It's clear that we're transitioning to a green and sustainable society, but how do we transition towards a just society? Very simply, a just transition means leaving nobody behind. It requires us to be more gender responsive, removing the legal barriers standing between women and girls and their economic empowerment, and allowing them to fulfill the rights to equal participation in all walks of life, in line with the CEDAW Convention. 2, it means implementing policies that prioritize the creation of good jobs for young people, billions of whom will enter the workplace in the next decade. And 3rd, it means promoting, respecting, and protecting Indigenous rights, including the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, to ensure that we're not implementing sustainability projects in the name of progress, when we are in fact violating Indigenous rights over their lands and territories. The second point I want to make is to highlight the greater need for a rights-based approach to inclusion, participation, and engagement. I was very glad to see the words right-based being included within this question, because I think too often we fall into making the business case for inclusion. We argue that including historically marginalized groups in climate decision-making leads to better outcomes, but really we shouldn't need to be making this argument at all. Instead, we need to be advocating for rights-based approaches. Everybody should be able to actively participate in climate action because it is their right to do so. But we need to create the governance mechanisms to facilitate this. COP27 last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, we saw a really good example of this with the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage when they set aside 3 seats on their advisory board for women, youth, and indigenous constituencies. We need to replicate this and scale it up in the UNFCCC process because these constituencies are better placed to advocate for their needs than their national representatives are. And the third and final point is underpinning everything is the need for a strong, independent, and fully funded judiciary. I've had the privilege of sitting in some amazing sessions in the last 2 weeks with a number of very esteemed judges, particularly the one organized by the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment yesterday. But we need to see judges around the world following the examples of the judges who came here to COP28 and really reinforcing environmental rule of law. Sometimes our lawmakers, despite their best intentions, are unable to act with the urgency and the ambition that we need to keep both within planetary boundaries and also the human rights boundaries as well, if we haven't already passed those tipping points. A functioning and independent judiciary, acting without fear or favor, can uphold human rights in the face of the crisis as the ultimate guardians of the rule of law, and ensure that there is accountability around the world for the decisions that are agreed here in Dubai. I think I'm good for time, but thank you very much for the opportunity to share these remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. Reinforcing environmental law and expectations of the judiciary a tall order across the world, but not insurmountable, I would imagine, once this agenda is made very focused for them. Okay, for our next speaker then, over to you, Lara.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Quick question. Put up your hand if you're a practicing lawyer. Okay, a few. Cool. Number one, don't overlook bar associations and law societies. Every lawyer that practices in the world gets issued their certificate to practice, usually on a yearly rolling basis, and it's often the law societies and bar associations that issue that, and they are sometimes also the regulator. So I come from the International Bar Association, and we've been trying to help skill up bars in regulating their own lawyers and clarifying the scope of obligations that lawyers have in issuing climate competent legal advice. What does it mean to be a lawyer against the IPCC 6th assessment report, and how is your advice squaring up against what the client needs? And that's where a lot of amazing creativity can come in. You know, it would be great to have compulsory CPD, continuous professional development, on topics like Indigenous technical knowledge, on topics like climate change and SDGs, because that's how you build trust. You build trust by respecting people's boundaries and cultures, but you can't do that if you don't know. And so that would be number one. Number two, whoever's assisting with ICJ advisory opinions, please don't forget the UNGPs. It's a great way to bring corporates into the space to respect human rights in a regulatory gap where it's just only states. And I would draw your attention to the UN special mechanism process that was used recently by Client Earth. We have a really interesting letter and communication from special rapporteurs in the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights about the scope and clarification of obligations of states where it's a state-based state-owned corporate enterprise, and I think that's a really interesting way to bring in more of the corporate lawyers into the world in terms of implementing NDCs. The third is to think about, for all of us, the enforcement of existing judgments. Since 2015, there was a huge uptick in climate litigation, and there are many judgments that have now been decided or are on appeal. So instead of asking what new cases are being brought, I'd love a consolidation of how we enforce the judgments already rendered. If the Millie Defensi case, which is going on appeal in April, if that judgment is upheld, how do you enforce an order for a company to reduce its emissions? At what point and what evidence thresholds do you have to demonstrate that they're not? And these are really interesting legal questions that lawyers around the world can assist with, because there are judgments around the world that have been rendered. And this is also where I would say judgments for the benefit of First Nations communities is really important. How do you deliver justice in that sense? Mirroring these topics of the just transition in a way that does things with them, not for them. So 2:53, 7 seconds left.
Incredible. Actually, that's good. I wonder, because Cynthia and Ian are having trouble joining online, if maybe Elena wanted to share just a couple of the award-winning laws and policies at the local level that her organization, the World Future Council, offers as examples of best practice laws and policies.
I'm very happy to do so. At least the process I can share a bit about. And I do need to correct a tiny typo, which may have been the quickest way to a PhD ever, because I also do appreciate and respect the work that goes into achieving a doctorate. I'm not a doctor. I am a sustainability professional who's passionate about all the issues, but I haven't earned that moniker yet, so just stand corrected in the rules here. So my organization is called the World Future Council. We work for the rights of future generations and to ensure that climate action is done equitably, justly across generations, including various groups among those mentioned here. And one thing that we do focus on is something called the Future Policy Award, which looks at policies from the globe, essentially, that are effective in tackling issues which are then determined on a yearly basis. And these policies or laws or approaches are then submitted. They must have a tenure already. They must have been already in place, so I think it's a 3-year period. Professor Marie-Claire knows a lot about this as she sits on the jury. And then they are voted on to see how much teeth do they have, how effective are they, how well respected are they in the countries, are they scalable, and are they transferable across jurisdictions and countries and groups. So it's a very interesting approach to an issue that actually really matters, to give frameworks and processes and to codify that into laws and effective policies. We believe it's unique across the globe, and if you're ever interested, do please have a look on our website and see what's out there. We've done different topics across the years. Professor Marie-Claire, you may know them better than I, but the most recent one was, in fact, chemical additions in not only children's products, but also in makeup and things that we all come in contact with every day, so-called forever chemicals. So, the field is broad, the field is deep, and important. It touches all of us. So please do have a look at that to see how it impacts you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, now it's over to you. If you've got any questions, either for this panel or I don't think we've got for the some members of the previous panel are here. Perhaps we can take some questions. Would you like to say who you are and then your question? Thank you.
Thanks so much. My name is Maeve McDermott. I have 2 questions, but I'll start with one, and then if somebody else has a question, I'll turn it over to them first. So my first question would be for Laura. Laura, I had the pleasure of meeting you last year and hearing you speak, and at the time you were referring to lawyers' involvement with climate action as climate-conscious lawyering, and I noticed now that you're using the term climate-competent lawyering, and I was wondering if you could just distinguish the difference.
Yeah, I can, and I should say I'm a commercial lawyer by training, Australian qualified, and I did a lot of environment planning and disputes work and representation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Climate-conscious lawyering makes it seem like you're a tree hugger, and that's not me saying that, that's corporate lawyers from outside this blue zone bubble saying that, and so we're really putting it in to the competency space. It's just a simple matter of is your legal advice competent or not? And does your PII or professional indemnity insurance kick in? Can you be sued if your legal advice isn't competent? If the client gets in trouble because your legal advice wasn't long-term enough. For example, you're rendering advice on a loan that lasts for 30 years on a property that will be underwater in 30 years and you've not raised that. Yeah, I'd sue you. Like, I'd say, that's not great lawyering. So that's squarely what it is. It brings it into the realm of corporates and corporations, and we need certainty on this. So competency is something we can be certain about. We have, all lawyers have existing professional obligations, both duties to the court and to their client, and so putting it squarely in the language of what we already understand is the best way forward.
Any other questions? There's a lady over there. So. Again, if you would say who you are.
Thank you very much. My name is Ugbed. I'm from Somalia. I'm the Director of Communication, Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. I'm not a legal practitioner and I don't have a legal background. I work in communication. I'm a communication expert. Somalia is one of the countries affected by climate change the most. At the moment, yeah, like most media knows that what we are going through. But I wanted to know, the minister sent me to do, the proper network and, expertise with regards to what's the role of the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs in, climate mitigation and things. So I wanted to ask if you could give us, like, where should we start? If we are starting from ground, what should we do as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs to be part of the, yeah, thank you.
I can take the first hit at this one and then pass over to Lara if she has anything. Thank you so much for your question. Really great to hear from you, and great to hear there's so much interest from the Ministry of Justice in Somalia on this kind of work. I would say under SDG 16 there's a big focus on access to justice for all, and I would work with the institutions and the structures that you already have. About 80% of justice problems worldwide are solved by customary and informal justice systems, so they're actually outside the scope of the formal court process. And many people by, whether it's customary means of solving justice, whether it's alternative dispute resolution services, are able to access very quick, cost-effective, geographically convenient and culturally sensitive means of resolving the issues that they have. Particularly in a very climate-sensitive context like Somalia, where water scarcity, competition over land is increasing. These can actually be very sort of quick and effective means of combating some of the challenges and some of the difficulties and the insecurities that are arising because of climate change. We do some work in Somalia as well. I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards to explain a little bit more. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Just to say, I quickly Googled the Somali Bar Association, and I mean, genuinely, and I would be really happy to assist if you have any contacts in the Somali Bar, or if you don't, I'm sure I can search our Rolodex, and I'm sure we might have a few. Of course, coming back to that idea of trust and it being such an individualized thing, sometimes one person can be a lever to make all the difference. But I think it would be interesting to see what the Bar Association is doing on this in terms of skilling up all their lawyers, and also seeing how lawyers that are being brought into the fold are being taught, because people that work at the Ministry of Justice, those lawyers would also be holding that same practicing certificate that the Somali Bar Association would be issuing. So that's another backdoor way to get that training in for governments, and also for jurists as well. Sometimes bar associations work with lawyers. So, come find me after.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We might want to invite Maître Ayman Cherkaoui back up to the panel, just because he does have expertise specifically in assisting young people across Africa to get involved in these issues, and of course from his work with the World Commission. Daniel, you can stay where you are. There's an extra chair.
We have enough chairs.
Yeah.
Sorry. Would you like to perhaps address some of the questions for this,
Yeah.
to get everything addressed? And also, can you perhaps also say, what's the trigger to get the professional lawyers to actually address? I know you're going to come in and
you might need to say it for the people online.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
okay. And what can you, what's the trigger to get the lawyers to actually start to think in this way and to address these issues generally?
It's quite a question.
No pressure.
I think, well, and I'll look at it from two perspectives, one of which being the Work Commission Environmental Law, and I'd be happy to invite Fabiano to come in if he'd like to contribute his perspective on this particular aspect as one of the co-chair of the Climate Change Law Specialist Group. What we have tried to do in the space of the Work Commission Environmental Law, and again, I reiterate the fact that it is about law in general and not specifically necessarily environmental law, but that is the name of the commission, is that we have specialist groups and task forces. And we have specialist groups that are looking at various areas of environmental law. So getting into the nitty-gritty, getting into the level of detail is important because we like to be, expertise is reassuring to our community when we master what we're talking about, and highlighting, fostering, encouraging this kind of expertise in a manner that is equitable, in a manner that is accessible is important. So that is why we have different specialist groups, and again, Fabiano with Francesco are the co-chairs of the one on climate change law. The other element of that is connected to the task forces. So we also have task forces that I won't say are more specialized, but are looking at issues that are even narrower, whether it is in terms of timeliness or in terms of scope or focus. As an example, we have one on the rights of nature. We have one on the plastic treaty negotiation. We have one on the Global Judicial Institute on the environment. So we have those elements that are quite focused, and I think it's important to be laser focused. And if I may use a perspective that is often used, but in a different space, which is management consulting, as I had a life in that space as well, that's the one of the dolphin. The image of the dolphin that is one that is able to go into a lot of depth, but at the same time can jump out of the ocean, of the sea, to get a better understanding of what the landscape is like. So this ability of being very specific and precise while having at the same time an understanding that is quite broad is, I think, quite useful for lawyers, and I think speaks to the kind of requests that they need to address, because as specialized as we can be, we often get questions that are really completely in a different space, and we need to find a way to address them in a manner that is honest, intellectually rigorous, and cautious, to not be to be climate competent as opposed to climate conscious, to use that image that was aptly put out previously. And when it comes to our continent and those elements there, because I think there was also the African element I think I heard. As leveraging a different hat, but I work a lot with major group and stakeholders within the space of UNEP, and also work a lot with African youth in general. And I think there's a combination of two things. One is really to, I hope I'm not being too long, I'm trying to address the point and I'm very aware of time at the same time. So I'll try to speed up a bit. But what I wanted to raise there is we should not at any point start from the point that there is no capacity. And capacity building is important, but capacity strengthening to a certain extent is even more so, because the capacities are there. And there is also elements that can be learned from that. From those jurisdictions, there are amazing laws that exist, amazing environmental laws that exist. They do have sometimes challenges when it comes to the implementation, but the body of law is there, and there are amazing competencies that need to be further raised, echoed, and brought into the spaces where they can be more helpful to the global agenda. I think it's very important to keep in mind. And finally, and again, I'm sorry, it's been a difficult time for many of us, again, reiterating the legacy of Professor Salim Al-Huk in that regard, because when it comes to capacity building, one of the things that he was keen on doing, and I think that speaks to many of you in this space that are teaching in the academic space, is the sense that when we strengthen capacity, quite often and that's also a good thing, but we should not limit ourselves to that. We focus on the individual. But it's also important to build the capacity of the institutions, because those are retained, those are constant. And he was keen on fostering and building the capacity and strengthening and raising and the capacity of universities from the global south, in particular from the least developed countries. He created a network of universities in that regard. And he was always saying, I remember, that it is, for example, from the perspective of Bangladesh, that it is Bangladesh that has something to teach to the rest of the world when it comes to adaptation and loss and damage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So can I then thank our panel in the traditional way, Daniel, Lara, Lina and Ayman, for a very good way of addressing some quite difficult questions. Thank you. And now I hand over to my co-chair, Lina, who's going to do the next sections.
Thank you, Professor Yasmin. So it's my opportunity now and my chance to welcome a number of you to the stage here to the right. Dr. Antoinette Nestor, Maeve McDermott, and Tejas Rao. And they're going to join us here, and they're going to talk a little bit about what some of the outcomes were from the very important day on last week, on the 5th it was, so the Law and Governance Day for Climate Issues. And they'll also be talking a little bit about the award laureates. And so I'm happy to hand over to you, and perhaps it's Tejas joining. He's going to stand here. Okay, so I'll hand it over to you now. Welcome.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you very much. My name is Maeve McDermott, and I know that it was already mentioned a little bit, but I just want to report on some of the outcomes from this year's Climate Law and Governance Day. So as Professor Mary-Claire Cordonier-Seger mentioned, we were delighted to be joined by 1,730 registrants, both online and in person, at the beautiful Middlesex University, Dubai, for an exciting 16 substantive sessions and 3 high-level plenaries led by more than 170 global experts from around the world. And during the Climate Law and Governance Day, while focusing on teaching climate law and the clean energy transition, as well as during the Climate Law and Governance Legal Specialization course, which my colleague Advocate Tejas Rao will discuss later, and in the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate Pavilion in the COP28 Blue Zone, academic leaders called for the creation of a Climate Law and Governance Education Commission to share curriculum and new tools in teaching climate change law and to support climate law education and climate law teaching that is being launched worldwide. To foster advancing climate competent lawyering across the board and to support requests for advisory opinions submitted to the International Court of Justice, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, and the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, lawyers such as Lara from the International Bar Association, the Brazilian Bar Association, Cornerstone Chambers, and more called for the formation of 5 more bar committees on climate change by COP29. And Advocates for International Development launched a new SDGs legal initiative, which we'll hear more about later. To support scaling up climate technology and nature-based solutions through law at Climate Law and Governance Day, in the IUCN Pavilion also, and in the ITER Pavilion with Energy for the Common Good, the Center for International Sustainable Development Law and other leading partners committed to new legal research and analysis on how regulations and law can incentivize complex clean energy technologies and nature-based solutions. Along with these new commitments, we were delighted to hear a redoubling of efforts to democratize education for global sustainability and justice by strengthening legal capacity through online courses and engagement. Partners from the University of Cambridge and leading international organizations celebrated the release of 4 courses to 2,299 learners from 126 countries from around the world, some of whom are joining us here today in the room and online. And now they have committed to provide more online sustainable development law and policy scholarship opportunities for over 16,000 learners from 160 countries by the next Global Stocktake in 2028. Additionally, our partners have committed to continue growing the climate law and governance community worldwide from 600 to 6,000 legal and governance specialists by 2024. And the partners celebrated the more than 1,600 climate law specialists that are currently signed on to the Climate Law Capacity Registry And we'd love to grow this community to 6,000 by COP29. So please, if you are not already a part of the Climate Law Capacity Registry, please do join this growing community of climate law specialists. And I'll turn over now to Dr. Antoinette Nestor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So each COP, judges from the Climate Law and Governance Initiative Program Committee recognize the leading efforts of climate law and governance practitioners and scholars, and this year's 2023 Climate Law and Governance Global Leadership Awards celebrated the outstanding contributions of Advent Michael Strauss and Advent Thomas Clark on the area of climate general counsel for rapidly innovating legal instruments to mobilize financial flows towards a just transition. In the area of climate negotiators, Advent Franz Xaver Perez and Ms. Marie-Claire Graf, Hita Lankin, Sophie Dowd, and Vina Valakrishan. I'm sorry, I really sort of didn't pronounce your names right. And the Youth Negotiators Academy and for training and capacity building of youth negotiators worldwide. In the area of climate law practitioners, Advent Professor Margarita Wevevery Singh and Advent Professor Payam Akhavan for taking the voices of current and future generations to international courts and tribunals. In relation to climate law faculty leaders, Professor Mohamed Safi and Ahmed Khalifa with thanks actually for their hospitality and engagement in co-hosting last year Climate Law Governance Day and the specialization course. And in relation to climate law, civil society and legal community leaders, Salomon Yeo, Jules Schoenberger, Vishal Prasad and the Pacific Island students fighting climate change for cultivating stubborn optimism among the international community for climate litigation. And especially this year, in memoriam, Professor Salim Hook for a lifetime of dedication to climate justice and the needs of highly vulnerable countries. Now, the 2023 Climate Law and Governance Student Essay Competition features submissions from students across the world in 4 different languages. So it was Spanish, English, French, and since last year we've had the Arabic language as well, and we're very thankful to our interns for the very hard work they did. So for the Platinum Awards, Aditi Jha, Camille Martin, and Tasmin Binte Sarwar won the Platinum for outstanding essays on food security and sustainable development, policy evaluation, how can investor-state dispute settlement better integrate the climate change regime, and towards the establishment of an international environmental court, revisiting the need for international judicial governance. And I should have said the last 3 were actually the titles of the essays. And for the Wall Awards, Ingi Johnstones, Luca Tendeira, and Mustafa Al-Masri won gold for excellent essays on, and I'll read their titles, Unilateral Declarations under the Paris Agreement, Prospect and Potential, the application of the Paris Agreement to companies under their duty of care, and the legal challenges of energy transition in petroleum-producing developing countries, legislative stability as a model. I should have from my glasses, my apologies. And so thank you very much, and now I'll just pass it on to Tejas.
Can we have a round of applause for the winners of the Global Leadership Award and the Student Essay Competition?
With that, we moved on as the Climate Law and Governance Initiative from the Climate Law and Governance Day to the Climate Law and Governance Specialization course. And we're lucky enough to have not just some of our learners, but also some of our instructors in the room with us today. This Climate Law and Governance Specialization course is a feature of the Climate Law and Governance Initiative. And this year, we were lucky to be hosted in the beautiful University of Dubai campus with over 600 registrants from around the world joining us in person and online. This unique half-day course with agreed principles and a methodology that is compulsory for instructors to actually attend a meeting before the specialization course takes place has a unique system of offering short lectures by leading global experts and professors who are able to report on activities in the blue zone. So it's the most current, updated version of the developments in every aspect of climate law and governance. We then do breakout sessions to encourage peer learning and the sharing of country experiences between all learners. So learners actually get an opportunity to engage with each other rather than talking past each other in a classroom setting. And upon the successful completion of the course, learners are awarded, as you can see on the screen with some of the pictures over there, the Climate Law and Governance Specialization Certificate. And of course, as are all of you in the room, invited to join us in the Climate Law Capacity Registry. We also have with us Susan Ann Samuel, who's done some excellent work as part of the CLG Secretariat in the room to raise that from 600 to 6,000 by COP29. With that, I will now pass back to the chairs.
Tejas, I understand that the government of Bangladesh and also a family member of our final winner, who won, of course, the Global Leadership Award in memoriam, is actually with us here in the room right now and willing to accept the award on Salimul Huq's behalf. And I wonder if you could quickly search the award, bring the award forward, and we will present it to them up on the podium here.
Of course.
And I would like to, with that, call Ayman Shirkawi, our lead counsel of climate change, to come up to the podium and to assist us with presenting the award, just as he so ably did as Master of Ceremonies of the entire Climate Law and Governance Day. Ayman.
Well, it remains a very emotional moment for me, and it's far more emotional for others in this space. And you will have heard me refer to Salimul quite a few times today and before. And I won't say more than that, other than to say that his presence is very missed, that it is very much in his spirit that we are continuing pushing forward in terms of all the important elements that he helped advance when it comes to loss and damage, as he's often said, but also, and I want to recall, as I did previously, his important efforts on adaptation and capacity building that are really, really, really important as well. And as I look towards my dear brother Hafiz, and there's something that we're having many conversations about this, and sometimes we feel that we've lost part of our confidence with him not being around, in terms of him being here to advise us, to guide us, to give us more energy, to push us, to challenge us, but always in a manner that was so humble, and to really be here for us every single step of the way. So it is with humility, it is with emotion, it is a profound sense of recognition, appreciation, and love that I'm happy to call to the podium my brother Saqib, as well as the representative from the government of Bangladesh, to Dr. Fahmida, who's the additional secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, to come to the podium to accept this award on his behalf and to share a few words with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, under your applause. Thank you.
I'll switch. Yes. Given that, it is now in your hands.
Should I? You first. I'm really grateful, first of all, to say thank you so much. Thank you very much to them. I'm thanking everyone in this room, and the initiative, the Global Leadership Award laureates to 2023 award. We are grateful to the initiative, the program, as well as we are grateful to the international community for recognizing our Salimul Huq sir. We Actually, he was an influencer. He was an influencer from the developing community, developing country community, and South-South cooperation community. And he was an influencer in country and outside the country. And we all appreciate and with deep regards, we all remember him all the time from the very beginning, because he was appreciated in my country as well. And you know, we started our Bangladesh pavilion on the very first day. We started with the tribute to Salimul Haq, and we started the whole negotiation process and everything. So I'm grateful. I shouldn't say too much, and I feel like I can't talk about him because he is among us, and he will be among us for the next 50 or 100 years, for whenever there is any COP or anything regarding climate change and loss and damage and other funds. And we request you to keep his name, uphold his name on behalf of Bangladesh and on behalf of the developing country community. Thank you so much.
It's very heavy. Thank you, Mary Claire. Thank you, Ayman. Thank you, Hafiz Bhai, for recognizing my father in such a prestigious manner. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Saqib Haq. I'm Salim's son. And on behalf of my family and our ICAD family, we're extremely grateful for commemorating my father for the work that he's done. I'd echo Farin Ma'am's comments. He was an influencer. If any of you have been on his Twitter feeds or Facebook pages, he was a master of the selfie, and he would always be on a panel letting everybody know what's going on, and be very, very good at about distilling the information of what interesting topics are coming through, the complexity of it, but in a very simple and a communicative manner, which is something that our organization and our colleagues, we're still getting to grips with, but hopefully we'll get better at doing so. You've noticed maybe several of our colleagues from ICAD wearing a pin where we host to be his office now. Take his work forward. It says Salim's mobile office. So if any of you are in the mood for collaboration or just to chat around the COP venue, please look for one of us. We'd be happy to take on his work or even just walk around the venue to take a break from all the chaos that's going on. I'm reminded by a comment from a colleague of my father's that whenever he was at a COP, everybody would ask him or ask her where he is, where's Salim, I need to talk to him, I need to have a coffee. And she would very calmly look at them and tell them, Salim is everywhere, he's just not here. And those words, I think, echo and resonate with me and my family a lot more nowadays, because we're very grateful for all the commemorations and memorials, and we really do feel him everywhere, just not here. But hopefully with us being his office, we'd be able to take that work forward, and I really am grateful for you commemorating him in this way, and happy to take his work forward with you. Please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much.
First of all, I would like to appreciate and thank Government of Bangladesh to owing the Professor Salimul Haq. I'll be very brief. I'm Hafiz Khan from Bangladesh, and I'm leading 46 LDCs countries here in loss and damage negotiation. So I'm Hafiz Khan is due to him. I'm a climate change negotiator due to him. Salim was an inspiration for me. And I'm working hard here with the spirit of Salim. Salim will be with us, not only for me. I know many, many people in this process was inspired by the Salim. Let's work with his spirit. Thank you so much.
To close, I would like to invite Yasmin to launch a new and beautiful tool that I think Salim would have approved of to help to take us forward. Yasmin.
Thank you, Mary Claire. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you about the work of advocates for international development, and in particular, our SDG legal initiative. Indeed, I stand before you here today with a strong spirit, brimming with enthusiasm and purpose. Now imagine a world where the legal community is not merely an observer, but an active force in eradicating global poverty and addressing climate change. Picture a future where law and lawyers stand as catalysts for positive change, making significant contributions to realizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. This is the essence of the SDG legal initiative. But first, let's go back to the very beginning. You may recall that nearly 2 decades ago, the 2004 Asia tsunami laid bare the stark reality of insufficient support for communities grappling with climate disasters. It was in this moment of crisis that the pro bono legal assistance emerged as a compelling, tangible solution to a complex problem. In response to this urgent need, a network of dedicated city lawyers came together, recognizing the crucial role that legal expertise could play in addressing the world's most significant and devastating crises. And so, A4ID came into being. Born from a shared commitment to making a difference, A4ID is proof of the collective power of lawyers in confronting and overcoming the immense challenges that threaten our world. A4ID is not merely an organization, it is a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring impact that collaboration and legal expertise can have on the world's most pressing issues. Our mission is clear: to coordinate access to pro bono legal services offered by the world's leading law firms and corporates, extending this vital support to literally hundreds of organizations globally, and doing so at zero cost. By facilitating access to justice, we empower organizations to tap into unparalleled resources and expertise of lawyers. This, in turn, equips them to navigate pressing and intricate challenges, which, of course, includes the significant issue of climate change. A4ID stands as a testament to transformative power of legal collaboration, illustrating how the collective efforts of lawyers can be a positive force and a positive change in the face of the world's most pressing needs. Our ongoing journey, we remain committed to developing a network where legal expertise is not just a service, but a catalyst for resilience, power, and progress. We believe in the transformative potential of the law. Indeed, we are living proof of what can be achieved. And so, the natural progress of our heritage has been developed, and the development of the SDG Legal Initiative. The SDG Legal Initiative is a call to action, urging the global legal profession to unite in pursuit of the SDGs. It is a call to action to the global legal profession to become part of the sustainability solution. It is a declaration that legal professionals hold a pivotal role in achieving these monumental goals. The initiative provides access to an international and inclusive network of lawyers, law firms, and other pro bono institutions around the world, along with resources, information on how you too can align yourself with the SDG framework. Our mission is clear: to establish a platform that empowers the legal community with information and resources, fostering a deeper understanding between the law and development. We understand that at the midpoint of the SDG agenda, this is not merely a moment of reflection, but a pivotal juncture to plan for a future where meaningful change is not just a possibility, but it is a certainty. The urgency of the meeting, the 2030 deadline, cannot be overstated. It is not just a deadline. It is a commitment to ending suffering, enhancing lives, and demonstrating the tangible impact of what law is capable of achieving. A4ID addresses the strides made, but remains acutely aware of the challenges ahead, particularly the intricate issues posed by climate change, which are addressed in SDG 13, climate action.
Yasmin, we do need to close now. Would you have one last sentence?
Well, the simple thing is to join us. Look on our website, SDG Legal Initiative, and join us. We will assist you to work together, SDG 17, in partnership with the rest of the legal community worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we say thank you to everyone, especially to Yasmin and Lena as co-chairs, and declare this event closed.